This is the Brattlecast, stories about books, old, rare, out of print, the people who buy, sell, appraise, and collect them, and a whole lot more, too. I'm Jordan Rich, along with Ken Gloss, the proprietor and the lover of books at the Brattle Bookshop in Boston on West Street, a legendary spot. You got to check it out when you come to town. So, speaking of coming to town, you go to towns all over New England, all over the Northeast at times with the trucks, and you find estates, and here's one particular one. Which state was this in?
This was near New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay, all right. So you're driving out there, you know there's a big hall, and there's a great story behind it.
Well, not only, it was interesting even how we got called into it. There was two men, they were married. One had a book collection, he had died, and his partner, his husband, wanted to sell it. And they called a bookstore in another city, and they said, yes, we'd be happy to do that, but you just have to deliver it to us, and then we'll work out the price. Now, the problem was he had about 25,000 books. So at first he checked in, and he checked moving companies. And there are actually a few moving companies that specialize in books, usually whole libraries. I mean, not personal libraries, but public libraries, estate or universities and so on. And they called him and they said, well, we can move it, but it's going to cost $35,000 to move the collection. And the woman there was from Boston, and she said, that just isn't right. And she had known our store and said, get in touch. And she said, would you be willing to go look at 25,000 books? And I said, sure, no problem. So we drove down and we got to this man's house. And when someone says they have 25,000 books or 30 or whatever, you always tend to doubt it a bit. I mean, a lot of people look at a room and they go, there's thousands and thousands of books. Well, anyways, he took us into the house, and on the first floor, and it was sort of a split level, there was a good number of books. And then he took us to another area, and there was a good number of books. And then he took us to the basement, and there were, we're going, there's 20, maybe it's 20 or 20.
You know it when you see it.
It was there.
Yeah,
and then we made a bid on it, and he said, I have to think about it. When we got back to the store, we called him, and we upped the bid a little. We decided we can't let this go, even though it's going to cost a lot of money for us to move it. We get back there a few days later to start. He goes, oh, I forgot to show you upstairs. I'm really sorry. Another 5,000 to 10,000 books up there. So he said, well, my husband, he was very intelligent, very good, but he was a little bit obsessive about collecting books. He goes, I was obsessive about chocolate, but that you tend to eat.
Right.
And you don't have collections. And actually, the other thing about it is a lot of times when people collect large collections like this, there's a lot of junk. It wasn't rare books for the most part. I mean, there were a few that were a little higher, but it was just consistently good photography, good literature, good history, some leather and illustrated books. And it was fascinating going
This gentleman, the deceased in this case, must have been a fascinating guy if he read even a third of them.
And not only was he a fascinating guy, but he collected well. He cared about the books. It was also interesting, and some of the subjects that he had were, good literature, good books with illustrations, some nice leather bindings, some history and architecture. He was an architect, I believe, but he also collected gay-oriented books. Now, it's interesting. They weren't necessarily, but if an author was gay, he collected like Truman Capote or that. So it wasn't like a gay, outlandish.
Wasn't gay themed necessarily.
It was just if this was because obviously that was a part of his life.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of really good and collectible authors in that. But the thing I said at the beginning, he was a little bit obsessive collecting 25,000 books. The other thing he did, he must have gone to every signing that ever happened either around Connecticut or New York City, because there was books signed, not necessarily, again, high-priced, terribly valuable, but he was obsessive. He would have New Yorker magazines signed if the author, there were some of the books that he had, and he obviously went to signings where he'd bring a stack of the author's books. And there were a couple of inscriptions there. I see you're back again. I'll sign again.
A regular.
And then I brought one to show the studio audience here.
Yes,
you
me,
Jordan.
And I'll share with the audience my description.
And what he did, if it was a book of short stories where you might have 20 different authors in the book, he would have stickers. And now what he obviously did, one sticker would be sign here.
Like you would a contract if you were a lawyer.
Well, also it was a way for him to turn the page right to the place he wanted it signed.
Okay.
And then he put a green, that was a yellow sticker. Then he put a green sticker when he got the signature. This one happens to be Carl Hyacin. And it was just, but you'd see.
May I?
Yeah, of course.
This book that I'm holding is the Salon.com Reader's Guide to Contemporary Authors. I'm just looking at caricatures in the front. I think Stephen King, Amy Tan, Kurt Vonnegut, Salman Rushdie, Toni Morrison, maybe?
Yeah. Okay,
so let me open up to just any page that has a sticker on it, and let's see what we have here. Sign here. I love this. He's very organized. This is PD. Kazuo Ishiguro.
Yeah.
Not familiar with that.
Remains of the Days, I think.
Oh, okay. P.D. James, I'm familiar with that author.
But if any of these authors showed up anywhere where he could go to a signing, so he must have been going to signings constantly.
All the time.
Because, I mean, this is one example.
Oh, my God,
but,
this is amazing.
You know, the thing is, we also think that he tended to collect a lot of the authors you'd see in the New York Times Book Review.
Salman Rushdie's signature.
Salman Rushdie's signature.
So yeah, it would have been cool to be a fly on the wall to see some of these people. After 20 people have already signed this particular book, I'm one of 20, 21 now.
Exactly.
Must have been fascinating.
We know that he had probably 10 or 15 books signed by Salman Rushdie, so he must have gone to the signing with these books. And I think he must have been such a character that they all seemed to be willing to sign all of these things. It's just fascinating to see what interests people. And then you start to say, gee, this became a hobby that you're going out, you're meeting interesting people, you have someplace to go and do things.
Wow.
The other thing that is interesting is he would ask them to sign and date a lot of times, and they did, but he didn't ask them to personalize it.
That was my next question, because in the world of autographs, in sports, for instance, I've heard it both ways, but I've heard that you generally don't want somebody to sign it, if you're looking for value, to sign it to you, because that diminishes the value. Does it have any impact on the books?
In sports, it does, because in other words, if Ted Williams signed something to Ken and people prefer just the signature, and I can actually talk about an aside to that. But in general, my feeling on writers is when you go to these signings, usually a writer is fairly famous by the time they're doing signings like that. Mm-hmm. And they do a lot of them because the publisher wants them out there pushing the book. I say, get it signed the way you want. 99% of them are going to be of no great value anyways. Yeah. And if it means more to you to have it signed to Jordan, June...
It would absolutely mean more to me, and I don't care about the value to anybody else. It's the value to me.
Right.
And that's why the Sharpies were born, because they can...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, I mean, the idea of having them all in one place in this particular collection is really cool.
It was really cool, but the thing that really was cool to me is I could sort of picture somebody like that going out, getting the books, saying, looking up, maybe reading Publishers Weekly or going on the computer later and, seeing what author is touring here.
If you read like Kirkus reviews online or whatever, you get book notes and so forth. And now it's back after COVID. We're seeing these author readings and so forth, which is great.
And there was one shelf I didn't bring along, probably about 20 books signed by one of the presidents who I think has probably signed more books than almost any other, Jimmy Carter. Well, not as president.
Because he's been around for so long.
He's been around for so long, and he wrote a lot of books. Probably one of our greatest ex-presidents.
Yeah, in terms of
as an
accomplishments.
ex-president.
Yes, in terms of accomplishments.
But, and you also, with someone like this, you don't really worry, is that actually signed by the person or the author or so on? Because most of these, he wouldn't have gotten any joy out of writing the name in himself.
Oh, no.
And most of them, again, it was a hobby. It wasn't like he was doing it to, make money or sell them later. When you were talking a little bit about the sports autographs, I have a friend who loves sports autographs, but he'll only get it from one famous sports person to another because he says no one's going to forge that. It's too much work.
Exactly.
But this man, I would have loved to have met him. His husband was a wonderful man. Couldn't have been nicer to work with and deal. It took us, my truck holds about 2,000 books, so it took us about 10 trips back and forth.
All right, let's just think about that for a second. 10 trips, New Haven to Boston is, 2 hours at least?
Yeah, 2.5 hours.
So people should know this guy really hustles, you and your team, of course. Who accompanied you? Same group?
Different people on different trips, but also each time you're doing that, you're boxing and carrying from either the second floor, the basement, a couple of thousand.
Who needs
books.
a gym membership when you've got this gig?
It's funny. I have a gym membership, but it's more because the gym relaxes me than it is. One of the days it was pouring rain out, and even though we could get close to the door, it was hard. And one day it was hard to tell whether we got soaked from the rain or from the sweat or from both ways at once. That's part of the job. And I only wish someone would call me with a collection that nice and that good and were friendly enough. And let's put it this way. Not only didn't he have to pay $35,000 to move the books, he pocketed a whole lot more than that.
Absolutely.
And we did the work for him.
I think I have a new name for what you do, the book safari hunter. But, you're on a trek and an adventure, a discovery. It's like Nat Geo.
Absolutely,
right?
Or like Jim Hawkins on Treasure Island.
Hawkins.
It's but that's one of the joys. It's every day.
Absolutely.
And
never dull.
Just the other day, we got called. Someone said they had 200 books and would have a few more for us afterwards. Get to the house. They had all 2,000 ready to go, and we were expecting 200. And they had very academic books. And the thing about that, they were good books. Academic books are really, really heavy.
I know we use them for doorstops here at the studio.
So, but this person was fascinating. He was nice. He had really fun things, and even to the point like he had some photography books by Mapplethorpe.
Mm-hmm.
But who had died, and obviously you couldn't get him signed. But if someone that he had taken a picture of was in the book,
you could get that person to sign it.
And that's what he did.
Well, the stories abound about things that are bound, about books, and it's another adventure in the life of Ken Gloss and the team at the Brattle Bookshop. Go to brattlebookshop.com, and I can't wait for the next adventure on the podcast for sure. Thank you, Ken, as always.
It's a lot of fun, and I love talking about books, and I will continue. There's more stories.
We're not going to stop you.